PV Magazine held its third Quality Roundtable in the United States at the 2018 Solar Power International Trade Show. As in the past, this roundtable featured investigations of solar projects gone wrong, but also for the first time a discussion of the intersection of data and quality. The quantities of data being collected by the solar industry are not small, and this creates new opportunities.
14.5 gigawatts of capacity equals about 500,000 trackers. Now, if each of these trackers had sensors in them, and they do, and were talking to us, that would be a lot of data. And messing around with this much of data makes me a kid in a candy store.
And in the presence of large amounts of precise data, more than ever judgment calls about where and when to act are critical.
Who's of the opinion that actually this 0.5% temperature differential difference is something for which there should be a module recall, that they should go back and take them out? Anyone? Or is this something that you would leave?
When we're looking at those kind of issues, what we're identifying is persistent issues that exist in a site. And what we have to identify when we're looking at an 18% drop in module performance is not only what is going to happen in that year, but what's going to happen over the 20-year lifetime, 30-year lifetime of this project, and how does that work? And so what we're finding is when we're looking at quality issues, how do you identify those at an early enough stage that you can first of all get an efficient remediation of it, so the module manufacturer still exists, that those kind of factors are still around, and that also you're doing it early enough in the project that the net present value of that remediation is actually going to be worthwhile. That you're not waiting until later in the project when you've lost out on some of that energy recovery.
But when getting into these sorts of heady conversations about data, sometimes it is important to come back to some of the concrete problems that are being seen in the field. Luckily, we had Shoals CEO Dean Soul on for this.
And quite honestly, it's just a matter of being cheap or not. And what happens is when your field burns or your rooftop goes down, you figured out, oh, damn, why didn't I spend that extra half a cent or whatever it was? And unfortunately for us, everybody in the industry, those pictures are all over the place, but everybody does their damnedest to make sure that's not shared. Those are everybody's dirty little secrets, right? Because there's lawyers involved, everybody's lawyering up, everybody's suing everybody, and the last thing they're going to do is let that kind of information out. And it's happening way more than you think. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a data point on harnesses and connectors. We are actively replacing about 200 megawatts of PV fields installs of EBOS that were installed less than 2 years ago, of combiner boxes catching fire, T-joints catching on fire, connectors intermated all over the place, and people are still doing the same stupid they were 10 years ago, just to save cost.
And ultimately, more fundamental issues may be getting in the way of even the collection of data.
To what extent have you noticed some of the degradation or some of the failures maybe are driven by the human component, the carrying or mishandling of modules in the field, the improper commissioning of certain components as installed, or various different, I don't want to be mean to installers or to us field folks, but various inabilities to meet the standard as required by the manufacturers?
I think from a baseline best practices standpoint, the industry does have some work to do still, for sure. Because realistically, when we talk about data, you want to make sure you're starting from a clean baseline, right? And what you're doing when you have not clean or not appropriate installation practices, you're building noise into that data automatically. Like Jason said, if you're leaving your components out in the field in cardboard boxes or wooden crates for a couple months because you got stalled or something, and now they have green algae all over the connectors that are open, or there's literally spiders living in them, or they're just dumped in the dirt. If you see in the way that the cables are actually routed through the racking systems, they're not at all being held to the minimum bending radii. You're seeing cables come directly out of cable seals on connectors and cable glands at 90 degrees. So you're automatically building in failure points before you even turn that system on. And those failure points aren't, again, going to be necessarily binary. It could be based on the level of humidity or heat for that day, is how much of an effect they have on the data that you're pulling from your system. And so you can't really do good data analytics if you don't know how clean your data really is. So I think if we were going to really talk about how do we improve data and how we improve the use of data, we have to make sure we're getting clean data to begin with. And that really starts with design practices and installation practices that need to come up a couple more notches.